Look, I must return to this climate change nonsense because you've heard me say many times the most dangerous politician in this country is the ego-tripping, I am right, you know nothing, Energy Minister Bowen. Now remember, whatever you think of climate change and its so-called advocates, last May, Albanese and Bowen and co received 32% of the vote. Now, apart from all of Bowen's other failings, it's clear that he's either deaf or blind and can't read a foreign newspaper, because net zero is increasingly on the nose in European countries. I mentioned last week the comments by Net Zero Australia, where they said, quote, climate policy remains in the grip of an intelligentsia that lacks the wisdom to recognise the boundaries of their own ignorance. And I said that Bowen is a metaphor of those who can't recognise the boundaries of their own ignorance. I mentioned also last week Tony Blair. He's now Sir Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister of the UK for 10 years. He warned against asking the public to do, quote, a huge amount to tackle climate change, unquote. And he said, Britain's unilateral policies have no real impact in the light of China's rising carbon dioxide emissions, unquote. Tony Blair said, don't ask us to do a huge amount, when frankly, whatever we do in Britain is not going to impact climate change. Tony Blair. Only last month, the Swedish Parliament officially abandoned its 100% renewable energy target to meet net zero by 2045. The finance minister sensibly told the Swedish Parliament, we need more electricity production. We need a stable energy system. As an editorial in The Spectator Australia reminds us, in Germany during the last winter, one town was forced to tear down the local wind farm and dig it up to get to the precious coal beneath. A more entertaining and apt metaphor is hard to find. Then last month, the UK Telegraph newspaper reported sweeping bans to cut greenhouse emissions in Europe are leading to a widespread public backlash. And that, quote, climate coercion is a very bad way to cut greenhouse gas emissions in Western democracies. Even the BBC had to admit that Britain is not capable of meeting its net zero targets. And as for electric vehicles, the UK Climate Change Committee report says that plug-in hybrids have performed up to 5 times worse than expected, and China is reportedly, quote, discarding fields of electric vehicles, leaving them to rot. Well, the ego tripper Bowen ploughs on. As I said, either deaf or blind, can't read a foreign newspaper. The bigger question is, how long before we all wake up? Well, Professor Ian Plimer is Professor Emeritus at the University of Melbourne. He's warned us for years against the so-called scientific consensus on climate change, which is an illusion. And now with summer approaching and ludicrous reports that we had last month, the hottest day ever, and Thunberg enters again, parading her ignorance, saying a top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of us unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. To spare us from this idiocy, Ian Plimer joins us. Professor Plimer, thank you for your note. Europe seems to have woken up. When will we?
Well, I think we're so wealthy, it's going to take a lot longer. We've got some serious problems. This religion called climate change is such that people don't question. And the first question you've got to ask is, can you please show me that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming? That's never been shown. So we have a fundamental problem to start with. No wonder the ideology is not working, because the basics just don't underpin it. The second thing is, what on earth is net zero? If we had net zero, in other words, we didn't release carbon dioxide, then you wouldn't eat. Because when you eat, you convert carbon compounds, which go into your body, and the rest you get rid of. We breathe in 0.04% carbon dioxide. We breathe out 4%. That's us getting rid of carbon dioxide. So if we had net zero, you'd have to drop dead. And this is what the Green Movement really is. It's an anti-human movement. It's a movement that's arguing very strongly that there is no place for humans on planet Earth, that humans are not part of nature. Now, I'm happy to abide by their rules as long as they pop off first. I promise I'll follow. So,
yes, we know.
We are just being fed total codswallop.
Yes, it is codswallop.